This video contains a little more detail about major histocompatibility complex, all right, or MHCs. MHCs you may also see as HLA, which stands for human leukocyte antigen, all right? And it's going to be those HLAs or the MHCs that are going to really be the major components that are associated with things like tissue transplants or organ transplants. These are things that those professionals look at to determine whether or not the body will reject a particular tissue or a particular organ. The closer matched the HLAs are, the less likely rejection will happen, all right? So in terms of the MHC, we've got two types of MHC, all right? We're going to have MHC1 and we're going to have MHC2, okay? Both of these are going to be proteins. This is my quick draw of a cell membrane, all right? These are going to be proteins that are anchored in the cell membrane and are going to be expressed on the outside, okay? So this is extracellular. Intracellular, okay? So this is the inside of the cell. This is the outside, okay? So this is MHC1. Draw another cell membrane over here. This is going to be MHC2, okay? So I drew them to look a little bit different. I drew them to look a little bit different because their functions are different, all right? MHC1 is going to be on the outside of all nucleated cells. So all of the cells of your body except your red blood cells are going to have MHC1 on the outside of it, okay? Really what that MHC1 is involved in is going to be self versus non-self, all right? Because it's really important that the immune system has a way to identify the cells that belong versus the cells that don't belong, all right? So MHC1 is a way that that immune system can recognize whether or not that cell belongs in your body, all right? The way I kind of think about it is you end up having the phagocytic cells like the macrophage, the dendritic cells, macrophages, dendritic cells, neutrophils that come along. What they're doing, they kind of crawl along, they touch the outside of the cell. And in terms of that, the way I think about it is that MHC1 is kind of like the secret handshake, okay? If that immune cell comes along, encounters that MHC1, that's the signal that that cell belongs, all right? So that immune cell is going to wander off. It's not going to do anything to the cells of your body, all right? That's why MHC1 is on the outside of all nucleated cells, all right? It's the way that the body recognizes self versus non-self, all right? So that's MHC1. MHC2 is found on our antigen-presenting cells. Okay? And those antigen-presenting cells are going to be our macrophages, our dendritic cells, and our B cells. Okay? So if you notice, I kind of drew a little bit of a groove here. All right? What the function of MHC2 is. All right? MHC2 presents antigen on the outside of our antigen-presenting cells. Okay? Essentially what happens, all right, what color haven't I used here? Orange. All right? This is our antigen. What that MHC2 does, all right, is it sticks that protein up on the outside of the cell membrane. And then when other immune cells come along, those other immune cells send the signal as to whether or not that particular antigen is something that needs to have an immune response triggered or not. Okay? So in terms of the antigen-presenting cells are going to have MHC2 on the outside of it. Essentially what happens, those other processes we talked about, because the antigen-presenting cells, the macrophages, the dendritic cells, right, they phagocytose, they engulf things, okay? And in terms of that, when they engulf those particles, essentially what they do is they digest up those proteins with the lysozymes from the inside of the cell, break them into small protein chunks, and then those small protein chunks get hooked up with MHC2 that moves to the cell membrane, and it kind of sits there as a cup holding that antigen out there going, hey, somebody let me know if this is bad, and we need to get rid of it. Okay? So antigen-presenting cells are going to be the ones that that are going to have MHC2 on the outside of the cells. All nucleated cells are going to have MHC1. All right? And these are going to become important when we talk next about the development of T cells, because in terms of that, those T cells are going to interact with either antigen-presenting cells, or they will interact directly with cells of your body, okay? Because one of the things that's going to happen, your T cells are going to be the cells that are going to be important in eliminating cells that don't have MHC1 on the outside of it, all right? And where that comes into play, as far as the example I'm going to use, is with cancer. When cells start dividing out of control, what happens is you gather lots of mutations. And a lot of times what can happen, either the MHC1 isn't put on the outside of the tumor cell, or it becomes mutated and it's different. So it doesn't know the secret handshake anymore, all right? And what that does is that now acts as a signal for T cells to destroy that cell, okay? So in terms of T cells are going to use both MHC1 and MHC2 as a way to become activated and target specifically within the immune system. And we're going to talk a little bit more about that in the next videos. All right? If you have any questions, please let me know.